The story kicks off with the final words of a web novel on a smartphone screen, declaring that there are 3 ways to survive the apocalypse and assuring the reader that they will survive. A young man stares at the device, swiping through the end of the 27th chapter, unable to believe that the story has truly concluded. As the subway rattles along, the audience meets Dokja Kim, a man who notes that people often misunderstand him because his name can mean an only child, though his father intended it to represent a strong and independent person. He feels the name is more of a curse, given that he has been lonely and single his entire life. He describes himself as a 28-year-old graduate of a third-rate college and a contract worker just trying to get home. His only escape is reading web novels during his commute. A voice suddenly warns him that he might get sucked into his phone. It is Sangha Yu from HR, the most popular girl at the company. Dokja freezes, noticing her pleasant shampoo, and wonders why she is taking the subway instead of getting a ride. Sangha tells him about her bicycle being stolen and she usually commutes by bike for exercise. He admits to himself that while she is charming, they live in completely different worlds. Sangha suddenly practices a Spanish phrase about borrowing money, revealing she is studying even on the train. When she asks what Dokja is reading, he panics and hides his screen. He cannot let her see the title, so he claims he is studying Korean. Sangha beams, listing her favorite literary authors, while Dokja deflects, knowing she would never recognize the obscure web novel he loves. The truth is that he has been reading a massive epic for 10 years. It helped him survive bullying in middle school, failing his entrance exams, and his time in the military. The series started with many readers, but over time, the view count dropped until he was the sole person left reading. It felt like a story written just for him. He wanted to support the author financially but was too broke, so he settled for leaving a supportive comment. Back in the present, Sangha mentions that their work contracts are ending soon. Dokja feels the difference between them, recalling that she was already promoted to full-time for her hard work. She offers to share a study app, but Dokja declines. He reflects that his life is nonfiction and he is merely a reader, not a protagonist. Sangha completely misinterprets his refusal as a resolve to live his own life and cheers him on. Suddenly, a notification pops up from the author, thanking Dokja and revealing that the story won a contest because of his support. The author offers a special present and asks for his email address. Dokja excitedly sends it, hoping for a gift card. The email arrives at 6:55 p.m., but it is cryptic. The author states that the story will become paid content starting at 7 p.m. and that this change will help him. Dokja is confused as he searches for the novel and finds nothing. Then, at exactly 7 p.m., the subway lights fail and the train crashes violently. Passengers scream in terror, fearing an attack, as crimson lightning crackles and a holographic screen appears announcing the end of the free service and the beginning of the main scenario. Dokja realizes that the genre of his life has just changed. Dokja feels a strange sense of déjà vu as a specific sentence from his novel pops into his head right as the train screeches to a halt and the lights die. He tries to rationalize it. Subways stop all the time, right? But the atmosphere is wrong. It feels exactly like the opening of the story he knows so well. And then, he sees it. Floating in the darkness is a creature with small horns and a straw garment. It's too strange to be a fairy, too malicious to be an angel, and too cute to be a devil. Dokja identifies it immediately as a dokabi. The passengers are confused, whispering and squinting at the floating entity. Reality and fiction are starting to overlap. The creature babbles in a strange alien language, and the passengers recoil, calling it ugly and wondering if this is some kind of augmented reality prank. But Dokja is the only one who isn't guessing. He knows this creature is the harbinger of a tragedy that lasts for thousands of chapters. Sangha is terrified, gripping Dokja's arm, but the creature suddenly finds its voice. It tests a language patch, asking if everyone can hear it now. A passenger, completely oblivious to the danger, shouts at the creature. He thinks this is a movie set and complains that he's going to be late for an audition. The dokabi just laughs. It finds the idea of an audition amusing and mentions that it did its research. Apparently, 7 p.m. is the prime time to set up a paywall to get the most customer. The crowd gets unruly, demanding the train start and asking for compensation. They still think this is a game or a show, but Dokja knows better. He freezes, warning Sangha not to move. The dokabi sighs, complaining about the noise. Its eyes glow a menacing red as it tells them to be quiet. In a split second, the complaining passenger's head explodes. Blood splatters across the cabin, shocking the crowd into silence. The dokabi coldly informs them that this is not a movie. Panic erupts. This isn't a dream, and it isn't a novel anymore. Dokja watches the blood pool on the floor and accepts the terrifying truth. The reality they knew is gone. The dokabi mocks them, saying they have lived cushy lives until now, breathing, eating, and living for free. But it announces that the free service is officially over. Mr. Han from the finance team tries to take control. He steps forward, waving his wallet, convinced that money solves everything. He offers the creature millions if it just lets him go. The Dokkaebi looks at the cash and agrees that money is powerful, but then it incinerates the bills in midair. It warns the man that human paper money has no value in this new dimension and threatens to blow his head off if he tries to bribe it again. The creature's golden horn lights up. It declares that there is no time for chit-chat because their debt is piling up. It snaps its fingers, and a blue light floods the subway car. A chime rings out as mysterious entities called Constellation make their entrance. A holographic blue screen appears before everyone's eyes. It is the first main scenario. The objective is brutal and simple. Prove your value. The task? Kill one or more living organisms. The time limit is 30 minutes. And the penalty for failure? Death. Passengers are frantically tapping at their phones, desperate for a lifeline, but the police lines are dead. Panic is setting in, real and heavy. Amidst the screaming and the fear, Dokja turns to a trembling Sangha beside him. He tells Sangha to stay calm. He asks if she remembers that game the development team was working on, the survival one where only a few make it out alive. Sangha is confused, wondering what work has to do with their current nightmare. Dokja lays it out simply. They are part of that game now. It sounds insane, but he insists that every game has rules. If they want to survive, they just need to figure out what those rules are. Dokja looks around, taking in the impossible sight. A Dokkaebi floating in midair, bodies littering the floor, office workers shaking in terror, soaked in blood. An old lady praying for salvation. He can hardly believe it, but the denial is fading. The story he read for over 10 years, 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, is coming to life right in front of him. People are banging on the doors, screaming for someone to open them, trying to smash the glass with hammers. But it's no use. Dokja forces himself to focus. He needs to think. He needs to remember how to survive this. The holographic screen looms overhead, displaying the cruel objective of the first scenario. Prove your value. Kill one or more living organisms. The time limit is ticking, and the penalty for failure is death. Suddenly, a commanding voice cuts through the hysteria. A man stands up, ordering everyone to calm down and stop moving. He warns that in a national emergency, panic leads to casualty. The crowd snaps back, asking who he thinks he is. The man pulls out his identification. He is an army lieutenant serving in Unit 6502. He reveals he just received a message from his unit declaring a Level 1 national emergency and ordering an immediate return to base. The passengers are bewildered. They demand answers. Why isn't the president addressing them? The lieutenant admits he's just a soldier and doesn't have a direct line to the Blue House, but he is trying his best to control the situation. Dokja watches him closely. He knows this man, not from real life, but from the story. This is Steelblade Hyunshung Lee, a major supporting character from the novel. He talks and acts exactly like the character Dokja knows. But something is wrong. Dokja realizes that in the original story, Hyunshung Lee didn't appear until after the first scenario. The timeline is shifting. If only he could read the story again, he could figure out why things are changing. Suddenly, a shout draws everyone's attention to the monitors. The Prime Minister is making an emergency address. He claims that unidentified terrorist attacks are hitting Seoul and other areas, and the government is mobilizing to fight back. Dokja nods internally. This cover story was in the novel too. It's easier for people to believe in terrorists than monsters. But the passengers notice something odd. Why is the Prime Minister speaking and not the President? Rumors fly that the President has already been taken out. Suddenly, violence erupts on the screen. The Prime Minister's head explodes. Then, the broadcast glitches. Static tears across the screen, replaced by the grinning face of the Dokkaebi. It mocks them for believing the terrorist story. It asks if they still think this is a joke or a game. Since they seem to think it's a game, the creature decides to raise the difficulty. The timer on the screen suddenly plummets, dropping rapidly until only 10 minutes remain. But the creature isn't done. It adds a horrific penalty. It announces that if the first death doesn't occur within the next 5 minutes, every single living organism in the cabin will be wiped out. The passengers lose it. They scream at the soldier, begging him to do something. But even he is helpless. Dokja notes that while the events are aligning with the novel's beginning, the pacing feels off. Just then, a scream erupts from the connecting door. Someone has been murdered in the next car. People try to flee into Dokja's cabin, but they slam into an invisible wall. A system message confirms that no one can enter or leave until the scenario ends. The Dokkaebi laughs, enjoying the show. It decides to give the frozen passengers a little motivation. It snaps its fingers, and the screen changes to show a live feed from a high school classroom. The timer for that classroom hits 0. The system announces that they have exceeded the time limit. Checkout begins. Bodies start exploding. Students scream for help as they are popped like balloons, painting the walls red. The feed cuts to black, leaving the subway passengers in stunned, horrified silence. The screen flickers back on. A lone girl stands in the middle of the carnage, heaving for breath, drenched in blood. The system identifies her as Jae-hee Lee, the sole survivor of her channel. The Dokkaebi giggles, asking the traumatized audience if they are having fun yet. A passenger screams in pure rage and confusion, echoing the terror they all feel as reality crumbles around them. Terror has completely taken over, and passengers are screaming, flinching, and trembling as the reality of the situation sinks in. In the middle of this nightmare, Dokja stands frozen, analyzing the chaos. Something is wrong. The events he knows from the story and the ones he didn't even know existed are crashing together all at once. He desperately wishes he could read the novel one more time to figure out his next move. He checks his phone, searching for the story, but it's gone. It's been removed. He's confused because the series wasn't even popular enough for illegal sharing. But then, he spots a notification. An email has just arrived from the author. The message is short and cryptic. The author explains that the novel is becoming paid content starting at 7 p.m. and that this change will help him. Attached to the email is a text file of the entire story. Dokja can hardly believe it. Did the author just send him the ultimate walkthrough? Suddenly, the air fills with the sound of chiming notifications. Blue holographic screens appear in front of everyone, announcing that each survivor receives a special attribute and a skill linked to it. It's exactly like a game. Dokja tries to open his attributes window to see what he got, but the system denies him. An error message pops up repeatedly, telling him the window cannot be opened. Panic starts to creep in. If he can't see his stats, he's flying blind. He decides to improvise and opens the text file instead. The moment he does, a system message flashes. His attribute has been activated. It turns out his special power is the ability to read at a phenomenal speed. The text flies past his eyes, and in less than a minute, he devours the opening chapter. That's when he finds the clue he needs. The novel mentions the protagonist looking at people in cabin 3807. Dokja realizes his mistake. He is in cabin 3707. The real hero of the story is in the cabin right behind him. He realizes with horror that the people in the next cabin are already doomed. In the original story, only 2 people survive that slaughter: the soldier Hyeonshung Lee and a twisted young man named Namwoon Kim. Namwoon Kim is introduced not as a hero, but as a predator. He is beating a victim mercilessly. When an older man, Mr. Han, tries to stop him by demanding respect for his elders, Namwoon just laughs. He asks the old man if he wants to die too. Namwoon points to the holographic screens showing people dying and declares that the army isn't coming to save them. He brutally lays down the law of this new world. Someone has to die, so they have to choose who it will be. He mocks the crowd's morality, asking how they can hesitate when their own lives are on the line. He tells them to think wisely because the old world is dead, and now there are new rules. Back in Dokja's cabin, the infection of violence spreads. Passengers turn on each other. Dokja watches it all unfold, feeling detached, like he is just a spectator reading a novel. He recalls a line about executioners pulling the lever together to hide who really did the killing. He watches a helpless grandmother become the first victim. He knows he shouldn't interfere because changing the story might ruin his advantage. But then, Sangha breaks. She screams that they are going to kill the woman and dashes forward to help. Dokja reacts instantly. He grabs Sangha, stopping her in her tracks. He warns her that it is too dangerous and that she will get killed too. He knows the harsh truth. Sangha is not a protagonist. She cannot change the flow of the story. He begs her to stay put and listen to him just this once. He steels himself, taking a breath. He wasn't waiting because he was afraid or because he approved of the savagery. He was just waiting for the perfect timing. Explosions rock the train car. Dokja decides that the time is now. He launches himself into the fray, dashing forward with purpose. The scenario timer ticks down. 7 minutes and 32 seconds remaining. As Dokja Kim steps out of the role of a reader and into the action, thick smoke fills the air, leaving the panicked passengers confused about its origin. Namwoon Kim is violently thrown back by the impact and furiously demands to know what is going on. As the bloodthirsty crowd, egged on by Namwoon, turns their murderous intent toward the old lady, the protagonist frantically searches for a specific item. Upon finding a small terrarium box, he hands something to a bewildered, bruised boy with brown hair for safekeeping. Dokja then loudly commands the crowd to stop, warning them that killing the old lady will not guarantee their survival. Having successfully captured their attention, He challenges their logic by asking what they plan to do after the old lady is dead, pointing out that killing her will only buy them a little time. He explains that if the system's rules are true, every single person will eventually need to secure a kill, leading to a horrifying scenario where they would have to turn on the people right next to them. Namwoon laughs off the warning, arrogantly declaring that they will simply kill the weaklings next and that the odds of survival are 50-50 anyway. Unfazed, Dokja calls Namwoon by his name, anticipating his cruel response, and reveals a massive loophole by stating that there is no need to gamble with their lives or become murderers because the scenario only requires them to kill a living organism, not necessarily a human being. The passengers quickly realize he means the insects in the terrarium. The murderous madness that was aimed at the old woman instantly shifts toward the protagonist and his bugs. Strangely, Dokja finds his heart beating with joy in this dangerous situation and questions his own twisted amusement as he crushes an insect in his hand. This action immediately triggers a system notification, confirming his first kill and rewarding him with a bonus of 100 coins. He then tosses the remaining bugs to the floor, sending the desperate passengers into a frenzied scramble while an enraged Namwoon curses at him. With just over 3 minutes left on the clock, Namwoon confronts the protagonist, questioning why he threw the bugs instead of just handing them over. Namwoon darkly assumes the protagonist did it because there were not enough insects for everyone to survive, laughing maniacally at the perceived cruelty. Dokja mentally dismisses this ridiculous assumption, bluntly telling Namwoon that he simply wanted to watch the passengers fight for their lives. Dokja's system then activates a personal skill, displaying Namwoon's character profile. The screen reveals Namwoon as a 19-year-old edgelord with skills like exceptional adaptability and knife fighting, warning that it is best not to get involved with him. Dokja notes that unlike typical teenagers who would crumble under the apocalyptic nightmare, this delusional demon had actually been waiting for the world to end and adapted with frightening speed. Impressed by the chaos, Namwoon grins and offers to team up with Dokja. System alerts showing Namwoon's increased interest in the protagonist, alongside a looming reminder of the main scenario's brutal penalty of death and the rapidly ticking timer showing just under 3 minutes remaining. Dokja coldly rejects an offer to team up with Namwoon Kim. Although teaming up would guarantee his immediate survival, Dokja relies on his knowledge of the future from the novel he read, acknowledging his deep hatred for the teenager's psychopathic character and refusing to step aside. Namwoon demands the protagonist get out of his way so he can finish off an elderly woman and secure his own survival. But Dokja instead grabs the teenager's wrist, silently mocking his edgelord persona and triggering system notifications that show Namwoon's affinity towards him dropping. Enraged, Namwoon forcefully pulls his arm away and launches an attack, activating his Grimdark Awakening skill, which envelopes him in a dark, purple energy and dramatically boosts his strength. Just as the protagonist wonders how to counter, he unlocks his personal skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, granting him the ability to read his opponent's mind and predict the exact trajectory of incoming strikes. He effortlessly dodges the furious teenager's blows, realizing he lacks the power to fight back and simply needs to stall for time. With less than 2 minutes remaining on the scenario timer, Namwoon realizes he needs to kill the old lady to pass the trial and switches to his knife fighting skill, aiming for the Dokja's heart. Dokja takes the burning slash to shield the woman, enduring intense pain as he reflects on the cruel reality of this new world governed by the survival of the fittest. Refusing to die, Dokja pulls out an insect egg sac, knowing that grasshoppers lay over 100 eggs during mating season. He crushes the sac, exploiting a loophole where each destroyed egg counts as a killed living organism, and a massive cascade of system notifications floods his vision as he is rewarded with thousands of bonus coins. Ignoring the system's tutorial, he instantly invests 2,700 coins to upgrade his stamina to level 10, drastically enhancing his physical durability. When the desperate teenager strikes again, the blade merely bounces off the protagonist's hardened body. Panic sets in for Namwoon as the final seconds tick down, and he swings his knife wildly in a futile attempt to secure a kill before the timer hits 0. Ultimately, the system proceeds with the checkout, brutally executing Namwoon and the other failing passenger, bringing the first main scenario to a close with only 5 survivors remaining in the train cabin. As a fluffy, horned Dokkaebi floats back into the blood-soaked train cabin, it expresses deep fascination at the sheer carnage that unfolded during its brief absence. The system officially concludes the first main scenario, announcing that only 5 passengers have survived the brutal ordeal. Looking down at the lifeless body of the white-haired teenager he just defeated, the protagonist recalls the boy's desperate, final pleas for help. Having thrown the teenager's own twisted logic about the survival of the fittest right back at him, the protagonist chose not to intervene, resulting in the boy's gruesome execution by the system. While a brief wave of guilt washes over him for not saving the other passengers, the protagonist is deeply unsettled by his own emotional detachment, feeling as though he is still merely reading his favorite web novel rather than living through a real nightmare. A barrage of system notifications interrupts his thoughts, detailing his slaughter of over 100 insect eggs and rewarding him with thousands of coins alongside the decimator achievement. The train suddenly jerks into motion, bringing a false sense of hope to the others, but the protagonist knows the old world is permanently gone and that he is the only one who knows the apocalyptic ending that awaits them. This harsh reality is immediately proven when a colossal sea serpent known as an ichthyosaur bursts from the nearby river, sending the survivors into a panic. Utilizing his foreknowledge, the protagonist remains calm, knowing the strict rules of this universe dictate that monsters cannot attack unless they are part of an active scenario. Looking up, he counts 21 stars in the sky, identifying them as constellations, mysterious, god-like beings watching the tragedy unfold through the Dokubi's livestream. Because he altered the original plot by killing the teenager who was supposed to wipe out the cabin, the protagonist inadvertently draws the ire of some constellations while earning the admiration and financial sponsorship of others. After a brief exchange with Sangha, who thanks him for inadvertently keeping her alive, he approaches the young boy in the group and proposes an alliance. Although the cosmic audience rewards him for this seemingly noble act, the protagonist silently admits it is a heavily calculated move to secure their favor for the trials ahead. The Dokubi then shifts its attention back to the terrified survivor, gleefully mocking a wealthy passenger's naive plea to be released. It explains that they are entirely too weak to survive the impending horrors on their own, but as a reward for clearing the first scenario, they have earned the right to be sponsored by the observing constellations. Frustrated by their confusion, the creature snaps its fingers, summoning glowing holographic screens in front of each survivor to initiate the critical sponsor selection process. The protagonist notes his coworker's luck in receiving 2 choices while he is presented with 4 highly unusual options. He quickly evaluates them using his knowledge of the novel, dismissing the dangerous abyssal black flame dragon and the restrictive archangel Uriel. While completely baffled by the unknown secretive plotter, he is shocked to see the incredibly powerful Monkey King, Sun Wukong, on his list, wondering if this god-tier sponsor could help him survive the impending danger. Before he can dwell on it, the fluffy entity returns to announce the end of the selection, cryptically noting an interesting choice before granting them a brief 10-minute reprieve. During the break, the survivors gather, and the protagonist recognizes a tall soldier as a vital defensive asset from the novel, immediately resolving to recruit him. Their introductions are interrupted by an older coworker who arrogantly demands workplace respect and complains about the protagonist's earlier ruthless tactics. Having lost his patience, the protagonist fiercely shuts the older man down, forcing the group to acknowledge their grim new reality of game-like interfaces, skills, and apocalyptic survival where their old societal statuses mean nothing. Just as the group begins to accept the terrifying truth and the protagonist urges them to evacuate the train car, a violent smashing echoes from the adjacent cabin door. The protagonist recognizes the horrific sound, knowing that the sole survivor of that cabin, the true main character of the novel, is trying to brutally break through, warning his companions that they will all be slaughtered if they stay. The group frantically scrambles to escape, only to find the train's exit doors completely jammed as the relentless pounding on the partition grows increasingly savage. As heavy blows violently slam against the cabin door, signaling the imminent breakthrough of the story's true protagonist, the group frantically searches for an escape route. They attempt to force open a door leading outside, but the metal remains firmly jammed. The protagonist briefly considers spending his newly acquired coins to boost his own strength but quickly dismisses the idea as too reckless for this early stage. Instead, he discreetly activates his profiling skill to inspect the tall soldier's abilities, discovering that the man possesses high physical stats and a powerful stigma, instructing the simple-minded soldier to focus and imagine using his latent power. The protagonist watches in satisfaction as the soldier unleashes a massive burst of energy that completely blasts the broken sliding doors open. This act earns the soldiers deep trust, but their relief is short-lived. As they rush out onto the railway bridge to avoid the terror breaking through the cabin, the fluffy Dokubi suddenly manifests in a flash of golden light. Deeply annoyed that they moved before it was ready, forced to adapt, the creature immediately initiates the second sub-scenario, which tasks the survivors with crossing the collapsed bridge to reach the nearby station within 20 minutes. When his observant coworker points out that the bridge is still perfectly intact, the protagonist realizes they have exploited a major loophole by escaping the train early, and he urgently commands the group to sprint across without hesitation. Midway across, the river violently churns, and a colossal, terrifying sea serpent erupts from the water. Knowing that the massive beast is only there to destroy the bridge as part of the scenario's script, the protagonist calculates that they still have enough time to make it across safely. However, the sadistic Dokkaebi refuses to let them off so easily, adjusting the scenario's difficulty on the fly to make things more entertaining. A dark, ominous energy suddenly rises from the ground, resurrecting the dead as a horrifying horde of zombies directly in their path. As the dust settles from the collapsed railway bridge, the protagonist realizes that his soldier companion and the young boy have successfully made it across to safety. But to his surprise, his two co-workers have also survived the initial destruction. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light creates an ethereal walkway over the massive gap, prompted by a rare constellation's blessing known as a deus ex machina. The system announces that this bridge of light can only be crossed by an even number of people, or else it will shatter. While wondering which powerful constellation could be backing his female co-worker, the protagonist attempts to use his profiling skill on her but fail, leading him to the shocking realization that his co-workers are real people who were never part of the original novel's plot. Before he can fully process this, a horrifying demonic zombie crashes onto their section of the bridge, and the protagonist immediately recognizes it as the reanimated corpse of the psychotic teenager he had just defeated. Knowing they need an even number to cross the bridge, the protagonist tries to coordinate an escape, but the older, arrogant co-worker suddenly betrays him, violently grabbing the female co-worker, and using a newly acquired speed skill to drag her across the light bridge. Left behind to die, the protagonist's selfless sacrifice catches the attention of several cosmic viewers who reward him with coins, while the sadistic Dokkaebi openly mocks his grim situation. Exhausted and lacking any natural combat skill, the protagonist decides to unveil a hidden trump card, activating a unique personal skill called Bookmark. This unprecedented ability summons a massive holographic book that allows him to temporarily copy the skills of the people he understands, and he immediately selects the dead teenager's Dark Awakening ability. Enveloped in a powerful purple aura, the protagonist effortlessly slices the zombie apart, finally securing his survival. Just as a massive, imposing figure begins tearing through the remaining undead horde nearby. Smiling confidently through his exhaustion, the protagonist prepares himself, knowing that the true main character of the novel has finally arrived. A powerful man in a dark coat brutally crushes zombies to the ground. Watching this terrifying display of strength, Dokja Kim doubts his own chances of survival against such a monster. Seeking answers, Dokja activates his character profile skill, but the system informs him that there is too much information, opting to provide a summary instead. The summary reveals the man as Junghyuk Yu, a mythical third-round regressor and rare pro gamer. Suddenly, Junghyuk lunges and forcefully grabs Dokja by the throat, questioning how he is still alive. As he struggles to breathe, Dokja recognizes his attacker as the very protagonist of the apocalyptic novel he read, the man destined to turn the world upside down. After Junghyuk demands to know his name, Dokja answers, prompting Junghyuk to remark on its strangeness. Without warning, Junghyuk lands a brutal punch to Dokja's stomach. Noting that Dokja has a strong body and has clearly figured out how to use coins, Dokja internally curses the massive power gap between them so early in the scenario. Knowing that Junghyuk has lost his humanity from past regressions and will do anything to get his way, Dokja decides on a bold strategy, demanding respect because he is older. Dokja claims he works for a game company and is a fan of the pro gamer. Intrigued but impatient, Junghyuk asks how Dokja survived the deadly subway scenario. Before answering, Dokja suddenly unlocks the second level of his omniscient reader's viewpoint skill, allowing him to read Junghyuk's mind. Junghyuk discovers that Dokja is highly suspicious, knowing only two specific people were supposed to survive the carriage, and is fully prepared to kill Dokja if he deems him a threat. Armed with this insight, Dokja explains that he survived by gathering insects from a boy who dropped them during an explosion. This revelation shocks Junghyuk, who realizes the future has drastically changed, and suspects Dokja is a dangerous anomaly who must have killed Namwoon Kim. Wanting to uncover all of Dokja's secrets, Junghyuk activates his high-grade detection skill, the Eye of the Sage. However, Dokja's personal skill, the fourth wall, immediately activates and blocks the mental intrusion, violently shocking Junghyuk with electricity. The regressor flinches back in disbelief, demanding to know what Dokja truly is. Just as a system panel reminds them they only have slightly over 2 minutes left to cross the collapsed bridge and clear their escape scenario. Internally shocked that he possesses a skill capable of such a feat, Dokja realizes Junghyuk's murderous intent and frantically changes his strategy. He halts the regressor by declaring that Junghyuk cannot clear the 46th scenario alone and desperately needs a trustworthy ally. Intrigued but suspicious, Junghyuk wonders if Dokja is another regressor, but quickly dismisses the idea since he would have recognized him. Capitalizing on the hesitation, Dokja bluffs that he knows the future that Junghyuk is unaware of, a claim that miraculously passes Junghyuk's lie detection skill. Stunned, Junghyuk assumes Dokja must possess the rare prophet attribute and listens as Dokja pitches himself as the perfect companion. Dokja explains that while regressors know the future, their knowledge becomes incomplete the moment they alter the present, and offers to fill in those blind spots with his supposed foresight. Weighing the benefits of having a prophet for future challenges, Junghyuk agrees to make him a companion, but suddenly drags Dokja toward the edge of a magical bridge. Just as Dokja's mind-reading skill deactivates and he breathes a sigh of relief, Junghyuk halts at the precipice overlooking a massive, terrifying sea monster. The regressor tests Dokja's alleged clairvoyance by dangling him over the beast's jaws, and asking if he is going to drop him. Knowing the protagonist's psychopathic tendencies all too well, Dokja refuses to beg, demanding to be treated as an equal partner before telling Junghyuk to just let go. Accepting the answer, Junghyuk coldly states that he believes him and releases his grip. As Dokja plummets directly into the monster's gaping mouth, Junghyuk ironically notes that he really is a prophet before the system announces his failure to clear the scenario. Plunging deep into the dark waters, Dokja is swallowed whole by the massive sea monster but manages to hold his breath and survive the descent into its cavernous stomach without getting ripped apart. After switching on a light to observe his fleshy and disgusting surroundings, he realizes that Junghyuk intentionally dropped him as a test of his worth. Dokja understands that the protagonist's repeated past failures have turned him into a lone wolf who only views others as enemies or subordinate, leaving Dokja with no choice but to prove his value if he wants to be treated as an equal. Checking his system log, Dokja notes that he has failed the scenario but also sees that several constellations have gifted him coins out of pure amusement. Knowing from his novel knowledge that the beast's stomach will begin secreting deadly acid in just 3 minutes, Dokja realizes his time is rapidly running out. Suddenly, a fluffy Dokkaebi appears, surprised by the human's complete lack of panic. Dokja reveals he has been expecting the creature to negotiate his scenario failure penalty, astutely pointing out that the system displayed question marks instead of death, which meant he could buy his way out. The Dokkaebi is highly impressed by Dokja's deduction but demands an extortionate fee of 5,100 coins, which is exactly everything Dokja possesses. Refusing to be extorted, Dokja boldly challenges the creature to kill him, fully aware that the Dokkaebi will not harm the very human who is currently drawing massive attention and entertainment from the cosmic audience. Taking complete control of the conversation, Dokja shocks the creature by addressing him by his name, Bihyung, and casually mocking his struggling career as a streamer. With the constellations growing increasingly suspicious of Dokja's true identity, he easily convinces a panicked Bihyung to temporarily shut off the broadcast for a private chat. Ignoring Bihyung's desperate demands to know how a mere human understands the inner workings of the Starstream system, Dokja makes an irresistible offer, asking the creature to enter a formal contract with him in exchange for making Bihyung the greatest Dokkaebi king. Bihyung initially bursts into hysterical laughter, dismissing the human's audacity and explaining that he cannot act as a sponsor since he is not a constellation. However, Dokja clarifies that he is not seeking a sponsor but rather an exclusive stream contract with the channel itself. The Dokkaebi is absolutely stunned that a mere human possesses knowledge of such high-level system mechanics, especially since humans are typically treated as disposable entertainment in these agreements. Capitalizing on this shock, Dokja explains his master plan, noting that a channel's success relies on attracting either thrill-seeking viewers or constellations looking for an incarnation to back. He pitches the idea that an incarnation who deliberately refuses a powerful sponsor yet still outperforms everyone else would generate unprecedented hype and entertainment. Realizing that Dokja intentionally rejected the constellations earlier for this exact purpose, Bihyung is left speechless. Dokja confidently demands that the Dokkaebi reopen the broadcast to show the universe the human who dared to stand against a regressor, promising to prove his worth. Before they can settle the deal, Bihyung attempts to exact the massive coin penalty for Dokja's supposed scenario failure, but Dokja calmly states that he has not failed at all. Right on cue, a hidden scenario triggers, tasking Dokja with slaying the massive sea commander from the inside out within 10 days or facing absolute death. Panicking over the sudden development, Bi-hyung frantically restores the broadcast, feeding the angry constellations a lie about a server error to save face. While the stream is live, Dokja exploits a system loophole by forcing the Dokkaebi to open the exclusive cash shop. After casually intimidating Bi-hyung by searching for impossibly rare endgame items to prove his deep knowledge of the world, Dokja purchases a seemingly useless assortment of monster mucus and sharp stone thorns. Confused by the bizarre purchase, Bi-hyung suspends the channel once more to remind Dokja that their contract will only be finalized if he actually manages to survive the impossible hidden scenario. Left alone as the monster's stomach begins to violently rumble, Dokja rapidly slathers the newly purchased mucus all over the stone thorn. Gripping his stone thorn tightly, he braces himself against the rushing tide of deadly stomach acid, fiercely vowing to make it out alive. The seven sea monster, Ichthyosaur, thrashed in the water as Dokja is tossed around violently inside its stomach full of gushing acid. Exhausted and panting, Dokja wonders how long he has been trapped and questions if he overestimated his abilities, reminding himself that he is just an ordinary reader and not the protagonist of this story. He hopes his mother is okay, though he knows she is tough, and wishes this nightmare was just a dream, noting that while his old world wasn't great, at least he didn't have to risk his life inside a giant fish. His survival skills impress the observing constellation, who reward him with coins just as the 4-day hidden scenario finally comes to an end. Covered in dark slime, Dokja is greeted by the Dokkaebi, Bi-hyung, who admits he is surprised by Dokja's unexpected method of survival. Earning bonus coins for being the first to hunt a Tier 7 sea monster, Dokja reflects on his strategy. He had used a sharp thorn from a stone hog, a creature that normally pierces and dries out its prey, but combined it with the protective mucus of a hammer seahorse to shield himself from the stomach acid. By funneling the monster's bodily fluids through the thorn, he not only quenched his hunger but also absorbed the beast's strength, leveling up his stamina through sheer willpower. While the Dokkaebi tries to take credit for explaining the situation, the system notes that Dokja's fourth wall skill partially nullifies his immense pain. Annoyed, Dokja demands the Dokkaebi open the shop so he can sell the monster's glowing core on the auction house, specifically wanting to trade it for an item called Broken Faith. Stunned by Dokja's extensive knowledge, Bi-hyung cuts to an ad break for the constellations and presents a stream contract. The contract stipulates that Dokja must exclusively use Bi-hyung's channel and share profits without picking a supporting constellation. However, Dokja notices the profit-sharing ratio is missing. When the Dokkaebi tries to lowball him with a 50-50 split, Dokja calls out the scam, knowing that without a supporting constellation, the Dokkaebi takes a hefty commission from viewer donations anyway. Refusing to yield a single extra coin, Dokja threatens to take his business to a rival channel, forcing the desperate Dokkaebi to surrender all donation profits and agree to an upfront signing bonus of 5,000 coins. Bursting from the water to breathe fresh air for the first time in 4 days, Dokja feels satisfied with his progress, noting he secured a contract and made a decent profit, especially since he used to be a nobody before reading his favorite web novel. He realizes his attributes window is glitching, which the Dokkaebi claims is impossible. When Bi-hyung attempts to interfere with the system to check, Dokja's fourth wall skill blocks the intrusion, making Dokja realize his hidden stats make him the perfect con man. Stepping onto dry land, Dokja immediately enters the highly contaminated area of the second main scenario, where poisonous fog surrounds a ruined city. And as a sinister constellation watches on, Dokja declares that the real game has finally begun. Outside in a ruined cityscape filled with poisonous fog, a giant monster screeches while Dokja frantically loots a convenience store. Prompted by system warnings about high contamination, he uses an item called Elaine Monkey's Lungs to neutralize the deadly poison for 20 minutes so he can safely head underground. Before leaving, he discovers an injured woman pleading for help and decides to carry her on his back. Knowing the nearby above-ground station was destroyed, he rushes to Gyeomho Station, only to find the survivors inside refusing to open the shutter because they claim the area is already overcrowded. Ignoring their protests, Dokja forces his way inside, terrifying the cowardly men, and gives the injured woman the monkey's lungs to stabilize her condition. As the men recognize the woman and question his identity, Dokja pieces together that these grunts intentionally abandoned her to save themselves. Angered by this injustice, watching constellations trigger a bounty hunter scenario that tasks Dokja with eliminating the grunts within 5 minutes. When the gang's leader, Cheol-soo Bang, attempts to threaten him, Dokja easily overpowers the group, noting that his combined stats are far superior to their single-digit level. Using his character profile skill, Dokja confirms Chialsu is a minor villain from the original novel who was supposed to be dead by this point in the story. Surprisingly, Chialsu's own supporting constellation is highly amused by his incarnation's severe beating and even rewards Dokja with coins. As Dokja brutally strikes the leader down, he reflects on the inherent cruelty of weak humans who use the apocalypse as an excuse for their vile actions. However, looking into the defeated man's eyes, Dokja recognizes a familiar, deep-seated despair that existed long before the world actually ended, making him realize they are not entirely different after all. After successfully fulfilling the scenario conditions and receiving his coin rewards, Dokja coldly orders a terrified surviving grunt to lead him to the rest of the survivors, fully accepting that he must adapt to the harsh reality of this new world. Arriving at the dimly lit Jiamho station with the injured Huiwan on his back and the battered thugs trailing behind, Dokja is immediately greeted by a clamoring crowd and a deeply relieved friends apologizing profusely for having left him behind earlier. But Dokja quickly reassures them that the decision was unavoidable. When Dokja asks about the whereabouts of Junghyuk Yu, Hyeonshung reveals that the fierce regressor had already left the station the day before, prompting Dokja to realize that Junghyuk's hasty departure is the only reason. The Cheoldu thugs are still breathing. Scanning the survivors, Dokja is soon approached by a smiling young man in a black turtleneck who introduces himself as Inho Cheon. Recognizing the name from the original web novel, Dokja identifies Inho as the true leader of the station who commands the thugs. Expecting retaliation for beating up Ino's men, Dokja is caught off guard when Inho instead acts completely amiable, loudly announcing to the starving crowd that their brave new arrival has brought them food. Sensing a trap, Dokja listens as Hyeonshung explains the grim reality of their sanctuary. The 87 survivors are harshly divided into a well-fed major group, rallied by Mr. Han, and a starving minor group left to suffer on the cold floor. The major group controls all the rations and purposely assigns minor group members, like Huiwan, to dangerous scavenging missions from which they rarely return. When Hyeonshung expresses deep shame over feeling like a hypocrite for questioning morality in an apocalypse, Dokja firmly reminds him that it is far better to cling to a hypocritical sense of right and wrong than to abandon morality entirely. Shortly after, Inho Cheon pulls Dokja aside to formally offer him a high-ranking position, using a manipulative guilt trip to claim that a powerful hero is obligated to cooperate and provide for the suffering masses. Undeterred by the underlying threat, Dokja returns to the starving minor group and begins distributing his scavenged food directly to them. This instantly draws the ire of several major group members, who aggressively confront Dokja and accuse him of maliciously monopolizing resources that should be handed over to Inho for fair distribution. Looking past the angry mob, Dokja spots Inho Cheon smiling maliciously from the shadows and realizes that Inho represents the most dangerous type of apocalyptic survivor, one whose weapon is the despair of others to consolidate power. Dokja notes that Inho has purposefully engineered a trap to force him to choose between surrendering his supplies to play the hero or keeping them and being branded a villain. But just as the tension peaks, a system message suddenly chimes in to announce that Dokja has officially entered the second scenario area. The tension at Jiamho Station reaches a boiling point as the desperate survivors angrily demand fair food distribution. Inho Cheon uses the chaos to his advantage, stepping up as the peacemaker and falsely claiming that Dokja has already agreed to hand over his scavenged food to their group for redistribution. However, Dokja quickly shuts down Ino's scheme, stepping forward to announce that while he is willing to share the food, he absolutely refuses to give it away for free. The crowd and even the watching constellations are stunned by his bluntness, with some higher beings expressing amusement and relief that Dokja is not acting like a naive pushover. Dokja further shocks the survivors by declaring that he will only accept coins as payment, rejecting regular money entirely. He sets a strict price of 10 coins per food item, a rule he enforces even on his own companions, prompting Huiwan Jung to step forward and gladly pay her share while refusing to be a freeloader. Inspired by her, the rest of his group, including a young boy named Gilyong who even pays extra for a previously eaten chocolate, quickly transfer their coins to Dokja by touching their index fingers together. By the next morning, Dokja has completely sold out his entire food supply to the major group, amassing a small fortune of 1,450 coins. Meanwhile, Inho Cheon gathers the rest of the survivors and cruelly announces that food rations will be severely cut to just 3 biscuits per person, encouraging the starving people to join the highly deadly search party if they want more to eat. Using a special incitement skill, Inho expertly shifts the blame onto Dokja, twisting Dokja's capitalist approach from the previous night to justify his own group's monopoly and turning the angry mob's glaring eyes toward the young man. As a limping gang member begins rounding up vulnerable women and elderly individuals for the fatal search party, Huiwan is eager to intervene, but Dokja holds her back. After secretly checking her character profile and noting her rare evolutionary attribute and demon-slaying skills, Dokja explains that saving these people now will not fix the underlying issue of the food shortage. Right on cue, a sudden burst of sparks announces the arrival of a new, unfamiliar Dokubi, who reveals that the previous administrator is currently undergoing discipline. Finding the station's atmosphere far too peaceful, the new Dokubi sadistically snaps its fingers and alters the scenario rules, completely destroying all stockpiled food in an instant. The creature then drops a terrifying bombshell, announcing a mandatory daily survival fee of 100 coins that will be deducted every midnight, with immediate execution being the penalty for anyone who cannot pay. While the major group panics over their vanished expensive food and impending doom, Dokja stands amidst the chaos with a confident smile, realizing his strategy to hoard coins instead of food has perfectly prepared him for this exact moment. Back at the Jiamho underground station, Inho Cheon announces to the survivors that they need more people for the search party and will withhold food from anyone who refuses to join. Dokja realizes this is an unexpected penalty that was not in the original novel, making him wonder if his contract with Bihyong changed the storyline. He had already suspected the Dokubi would try to make them suffer, which is why he advised Sangha to eat her biscuits earlier, though he didn't anticipate the new survival fee that automatically deducts 100 coins every midnight and kills anyone who cannot pay. Using his increased understanding of Inho Cheon, Dokja successfully reads the man's mind, discovering that Inho suspects him of knowing about the penalty beforehand. When Sangha asks what their next move is, Dokja refuses to head to the dangerous surface and instead declares they will find a new food source by hunting monsters in the dark Jiamho tunnel. Inho Cheon smugly wishes them luck, relieved to have Dokja's group out of his hair, but his lingering suspicion prompts him to assign Mr. Han to their party while also demanding to know how to clear the scenario. The group ventures into the pitch black, blood-reeking tunnel filled with corpses, which completely terrifies Mr. Han. Hyeonshung expresses concern over the danger and suggests sending Gilyong and the women back to safety, but Huiwan defends her own capabilities by mentioning her past kendo training. Dokja quickly shuts down Hyeonshung's prejudice, explaining that physical weakness no longer matters because anyone can become strong by increasing their stat. To prove this point, Dokja has Gilyong demonstrate his bug collector attribute by communicating with a cockroach, confirming that the path ahead is safe for at least 100 steps. Soon after, a new sub-scenario called Hunting for Food triggers, requiring the group to hunt and cook an edible monster for a 500 coin reward. A massive Tier 9 subterranean ground rat emerges from the darkness, a beast Dokja remembers from the novel as a relentless pack hunter. Drawing on a detailed butchering chapter he once read, Dokja instructs his team to sharpen monster bones on nearby rocks to use as weapons. This display of intellect successfully earns them weapons and impresses several constellations who gift the group 100 coin. Dokja then advises everyone to invest their coins into their physical stats, leaving only enough to cover the daily survival fee, warning them that he does not expect all of them to make it out alive. A fierce battle begins, and after defeating the monsters, they tally their kills, with Dokja scoring 4, Hyeonshung getting 3, and Mr. Han managing 2. Dokja is deeply impressed by Hyeonshung's strength and checks his profile, discovering that the Master of Steel constellation provided him with a starter pack that boosts his stats and grants weapon proficiency. As they wonder how to cook the giant rats, Sangha hesitantly asks Dokja if he knows more about their current apocalyptic situation. Dokja realizes he is trapped in the exact same dilemma as the regressors from the novel and tries to figure out how to avoid answering. Right on cue, Mr. Han screams and is dragged into a sudden chasm, providing the perfect distraction that Dokja inwardly praises, much to the amusement of the secretive plotter constellation. Hyeonshung lunges to save the falling man, but the momentum tragically drags Sangha over the edge as well, leaving Dokja to stare down the pit in sheer annoyance while the prisoner of the Golden Headband constellation complains about the frustrating cliffhanger. The other survivors question whether it is safe for Dokja and Gilyong to venture out alone. Dokja explains that the young boy's special ability will be crucial in tracking down the monster. Before leaving, he entrusts the exhausted Huiwan to Hyeonshung's care and promises to send a signal if anything goes wrong. The pair navigate into a light-absorbing area known as the Dark Fold, relying heavily on Gilyong's interspecies communication skill to guide them safely without having to spend any survival coin. Along the way, Gilyong confronts Dokja, astutely pointing out that Dokja intentionally let the monster carry away Sangha and Mr. Han. This revelation causes the absolute good constellations to frown upon the seemingly evil deed, while the secretive plotter demands a thorough explanation. Realizing the boy is far too sharp-witted to fool, Dokja admits he capitalized on the ground rat's habit of storing rare and precious items in their deep lairs, intending to use Mr. Han as bait to find the location, though he never anticipated Sangha being dragged along. Despite this cold calculation, Gilyong squeezes Dokja's hand and expresses his unwavering belief in him, reasoning that if Dokja only cared about obtaining items, he would not have saved the boy back in the subway. This touching moment moves a few constellations to tears and earns Dokja a generous coin gift, though Dokja internally laments the child's naivety in a world full of manipulative adults. As they draw closer to the lair, Gilyong asks if Dokja is a god or a protagonist who knows the secrets of this world, wondering if clearing all the scenarios will grant them a final wish. Masking his grim understanding of how this apocalyptic reality drives people to madness or irrational optimism, Dokja simply affirms the boy's hopeful theory to keep his spirits up. Upon reaching the ground rat's treasure trove, they silently observe a bitter argument between the captives. Mr. Han furiously blames Sangha for their predicament, inadvertently confessing that he stole her bicycle to force her to accept a ride home with him. This shameless admission disgusts the demonic judge of fire and severely annoys the prisoner of the golden headband. Mid-rant, Dokja throws his bone spear to crack the glass prison and massive force strikes Mr. Han, sending him flying and pleasing the tired constellations. As Sangha panics, Dokja steps forward to face the new threat, which reveals itself to be a formidable Tier 7 demonic species known as the Warden of the Dark. Dokja realizes that the ground rat's hoarded treasures are merely sacrifices to this powerful creature, which possesses a distinct advantage over other monsters and carries the Demon King's blessing. Although Dokja had desperately hoped to avoid this dangerous confrontation, the Warden releases an overwhelming aura of fear that Dokja is only able to withstand thanks to his unique personal skill, leaving him no choice but to engage in a deadly battle. The massive creature screeches into the darkness, a sound that Sangha, utilizing her level 3 interpretation skill, translates as a demand for them to be its mother. Dokja is amazed by her linguistic abilities but quickly urges her to retreat. Mr. Han panics at the creature's maternal demands, protesting that he isn't even married and should be a father instead. But the monster swiftly shoves a wriggling tentacle into his mouth. Realizing the creature reproduces by impregnating other species, Dokja confirms Sangha has no immediate plans for motherhood, and watches in horror at Mr. Han's fate. Attempting to fight back, Dokja strikes the beast, and its tentacles shatters upon impact. The demon warden flings its tentacle violently and Dokja's weapon shatters on impact. Acknowledging that the warden is far too strong to defeat conventionally and that Mr. Han ruined his original plan to sneak away with the treasure, Dokja pivots to his backup strategy. He calls out to the observing Dokkaebi, summoning Biryu, and demands a mailed item. Although Biryu initially refuses because it is Bihyong's responsibility, Dokja leverages the impatience of the viewing constellation. Threatened by powerful entities like the prisoner of the golden headband and the demonic judge of fire, Biryu reluctantly opens the auction house. Dokja trades an item specifically to acquire a grade D weapon known as Broken Faith, bypassing any commission fee. Biryu mocks him for buying a useless, degraded sword that requires specific abilities to wield, but Dokja reveals he came prepared, having purchased the White Star weapon aura skill after defeating the Ichthyosaur. He activates it, causing his magic to resonate with Broken Faith and forge it into the Blade of Faith. Armed with the ultimate counter to demonic species, Dokja admits his lack of traditional swordsmanship and the weapon's heavy mana drain, but decides to fight using his greatest strength, his knowledge as a reader. His memory attribute activates, allowing him to perfectly recall the monster's attack patterns from the novel. Dokja then triggers his second bookmark skill, granting him a partial, 1-minute boost of weapons proficiency. Moving with absolute certainty, he dodges the creature's tentacles, knowing exactly when it will pause after a double strike. He lands a decisive, fatal blow on the beast, and as it perishes, it confusingly wonders how its movements were predicted. Standing victorious, Dokja silently attributes his success to simply having read a lot. The floating Dokkaebi, Biryu, and the observing constellations are left in absolute shock as Dokja seemingly wields a high-tier ether blade so early in the scenario. However, Dokja notes that he merely combined his White Star weapon aura with the Broken Faith sword, a temporary trick that shatters the weapon completely after its magic power is spent. After receiving his reward for completing the sub-scenario, Dokja deliberately refuses to land the finishing blow on the defeated Warden of the Dark, falsely claiming he does not believe in taking lives carelessly. Tempted by the massive coin reward, An arrogant Han, also called Myung-oh, steps forward and stabs the beast, mocking Dokja for being weak and foolish. His triumph is incredibly short-lived, as system notifications reveal that killing the Tier 7 demonic species has drawn the ire of the Demon King of Wrath and Lust, placing a horrifying curse on Myung-oh that will make his worst nightmare a reality. Dokja coldly admits he planned this exactly to avoid the curse, leaving Myung-oh to collapse in pure despair. Moving on to the loot, Sangha claims some D-grade gear, while Dokja secures a mana brazier, using it to safely cook a ground rat leg for the group. Dokja even allows a humbled Myung-oh to eat, knowing the man will need all his stamina to survive his impending curse. When Sangha marvels at Dokja's seemingly impossible knowledge of the world's mechanics, he deflects the praise and turns his attention to a mysterious random item box, placing his shattered sword and the monster's core inside. Dokja triggers a hidden mechanic that forces the Dokkaebi to panic and abruptly shut down the broadcast, as the box is a recalled premium item known to break the scenario's balance by guaranteeing a higher grade reward. The gamble pays off brilliantly, rewarding Dokja with an incredibly rare constellation artifact called Unbreakable Faith, which his companions happily agree he should keep. However, as the group prepares to head back, Dokja realizes the environment is unnervingly devoid of insects. The young boy, Gilyong, weakly mentions that there is still one insect present, but before he can explain, a massive tremor rocks the area, and Gilyong collapses with a sudden nosebleed, signaling a terrifying new threat. Deep in the dark tunnel, the group feels a sudden vibration coming from above ground, where many high-tier monsters are known to roam. The disturbance is actually caused by the young boy, Gilyong Lee, who is intensely channeling his skills to summon a massive monarch species insect. Dokja quickly stops the boy, warning him that they were almost buried alive and instructing him not to use that dangerous ability again until given permission. Realizing that wandering into the black tide would get them lost, Dokja suggests they wait for a smaller insect to guide them. But Sangha steps up, revealing she has a similar skill that uses a thread she had tied down earlier during her kidnapping to help them find their way back. When asked about her personal attribute, the group quickly realizes it is dangerous to share such information, as Sangha's Starstream contract likely contains a pledge that forbids her from leaking details on pain of death. Dokja attempts to use his character profile skill to learn more, but unusually, the system states she does not have a registered profile and begins collecting information instead. Suddenly, their local channel reopens, and the Dokkaebi Bihyong appears, cheerfully checking in on everyone while they eat meat to recover their health. Using a private Dokkaebi communication method that violates the rules, Bihyong explains to Dokja that he was warned by management for leaving his advertisement running too long, though he casually brushes off the reprimand. The Dokkaebi also expresses regret over his past greed regarding a random item box Dokja knew about. As the group prepares to return, Hyeon-shung Lee begins showing loyalty towards Dokja, though Dokja refuses to freely share his newly acquired items and meat, insisting he will sell the food for coin. Back at Jeomho Station, the atmosphere is incredibly tense as the survivors are notified that they only have 20 minutes until the midnight checkout, at which point a survival fee of 100 coins will be deducted, and anyone with insufficient funds will die. Panic sets in as people desperately beg for coins to save themselves and their children, offering massive amounts of real-world money in exchange. In the midst of this chaos, a man named Inho Cheon activates his insight skill to turn the crowd's attention toward Dokja, loudly announcing that Dokja has the most coins in the station. The desperate mob surrounds Dokja, begging for his help, while Inho Cheon hypocritically pressures him, asking if he will just let the poor people die since he has so much wealth. Dokja calculates that helping the 20 people around him would cost him 2,000 coins. But as he reflects on the original sin theme of the first scenario, he questions how many of these people actually deserve his help, knowing they survived by taking other lives and now refuse to take responsibility for their own. With the Dokkaebi laughing at the unfolding drama and 10 minutes remaining on the clock, various constellations wait eagerly for Dokja's decision. Dokja flatly refuses to share his coin, deciding he is no longer going to play along with Inho Cheon's manipulative games. Inho Cheon feigns shock, and the crowd becomes furious, demanding refunds for the food Dokja previously sold them and accusing him of causing their impending death. Giving Dokja one last chance to hand over the coin, Inho Cheon threatens that things will get ugly very quickly if he refuses. The mob ultimately snaps and charges at Dokja with the intent to kill him and steal his wealth, but they suddenly collapse to the ground screaming in agony as Dokja draws his glowing sword. Looking down at the pathetic attackers and questioning if they truly blame him for their dire situation. After pulling up the character summary story of a common gangster named Min Song Han. Dokja notices the man's surprisingly high overall stat, and deduces that the gangsters must have committed heinous acts to get them. Turning his attention to Inho Cheon and his group, Dokja points out that the survivors are merely bowing to the gang out of fear of their superior strength and coin wealth. Inho Cheon feigns ignorance and attempts to turn the crowd against Dokja by questioning how Dokja amassed his own fortune. But Dokja easily counters by directing the group's attention to the station's dwindling population. When a survivor nervously suggests that the missing people were killed by monsters during patrol, Dokja quickly dismantles this excuse by highlighting that not a single member of the Cheoldu gang has died, and that they suspiciously return stronger every time. Dokja then exposes the bitter truth that the gangsters have been murdering the missing civilians because they somehow knew that killing people rewarded them with coins. While the secretive plotter Constellation agrees with this flawless reasoning and the prisoner of the golden headband watches in sheer excitement, the horrified crowd immediately turns on Inho Cheon, realizing his deception has failed, especially as the Dokkaebi announces that only 7 minutes remain until the deadline. Inho Cheon drops his friendly facade and orders his gang to slaughter the civilians and take their coins by force. This wicked command prompts the constellations of pure good alignment to officially brand Inho Cheon as an evildoer, and a chaotic, bloody brawl breaks out across the station. Amidst the fighting, Dokja strikes down one of the attackers he had previously promised to deal with, fulfilling the final requirement for the evolution of the crouching figure attribute. Suddenly, Huiwan Zheng undergoes a massive transformation as her attribute blossoms into Judge of Evil, the most heroic and powerful of the 3 judge attribute. Instructing Dokja to step back and leave the gangsters to her, Huiwan activates her Time of Judgment skill with the full backing of the pure good constellations. Enveloped in a fierce red aura, she mercilessly massacres the thugs, bringing intense ecstasy to the constellations watching the broadcast. Surveying the gruesome aftermath, Dokja reflects on how quickly their peaceful food sharing had devolved into a bloodbath. As midnight finally strikes, survival fees are automatically deducted from the survivors. System windows then flood the area, reminding everyone that anyone lacking the 100 coin survival fee will instantly die, and announcing that they have now entered the second scenario area where they must find the next activation location. The sun rises over Jiamho Station as the remaining survivors prepare to move on from the previous night's chaos. The remaining survivors split up into separate groups. Dokja Kim observes the departure, noting that only about 5 people remain outside of his own party and feeling confident that those leaving are strong enough to handle the world outside. With the disappearance of Myung-oh Han, Dokja officially welcomes Huiwan, the Judge of Evil, as their newest ally. As they prepare to leave the station, Huiwan transfers 1,500 coins to Dokja, explaining that it is his fair share from the previous night and that she has already compensated the rest of the group. Though Dokja mentions he would not have been so generous, Huiwan maintains her own principles, a display of camaraderie that delights the demonic Judge of Fire. Dokja then turns his attention to the Dokkaebi Bihyang, demanding his share of gifted coins from that morning's battle. Despite the creature's hopes that Dokja would forget, the coins are handed over, bringing Dokja's total to 23,050. To prepare for the next leg of their journey, Dokja spends 4,400 coins to upgrade his stats, raising his stamina and strength to level 15, his agility to 11, and his mana to level 10 so he can maintain his weapon aura. He plans to continue increasing his earnings by drawing more constellations into the channel as they move toward the next stage. A new system alert announces the activation of the second main scenario, titled The Encounter, which requires the group to traverse a tunnel and meet a survivor at a designated shelter zone. The system identifies their destination as Chungnyeoro Station. The group, consisting of Dokja, Huiwan, Sangha-yu, Gilyong, and a muscular man, enters the tunnels and immediately faces an onslaught of ground rat. By the time they reach Dongguk University Station, everyone is exhausted from fighting through 3 stations. Dokja suggests they stop to rest and search the area for useful supplies left behind by others. While resting, Dokja reflects on the previous station, Yaksu, noting that the bodies there were not killed by monsters but by the protagonist Yu Junghya. Dokja then informs the group he is heading outside to scout, ignoring their concerns about the poisonous fog by claiming he is going on a pilgrimage. Using his knowledge from the novel he read, Dokja locates the statue of the great monk Samyang near exit 6. He suddenly leaps up and destroys the idol, causing Bihyang to panic over the potential ruin of the channel. Dokja explains that breaking the seal on such idols allows a person to obtain items or skills from the associated constellation, which he needs for the challenges at Chungnyeoro. Dokja acquires 2 relics, the robe of the great monk Samyang and his praying beads. Returning to the group, he gives the robe to Huiwan and the beads to Sangha, Sangha immediately recognizes the monk's history as a national hero who defended Korea from invasion during the Joseon dynasty. To hide his actions, Dokja shamelessly claims that the items fell from the sky after he offered a prayer out of curiosity. He manipulates the narrative, suggesting the monk sent the relics because Korea is currently facing a new kind of invasion. His calculated praise moves the constellation, the bald leader of the peasants' army, who forgives Dokja for destroying the statue and even gifts him another 100 coin. Dokja notes that constellations are directly influenced by their fame and cannot resist such public praise. With the items secured, the group begins the final half-mile trek to Chungnyeoro. They manage to avoid further encounters with ground rats thanks to Gilyong using his interspecies communication skill. As they near their destination, a notification appears announcing the arrival of a new sub-scenario, prompting Dokja to tell everyone to stand back. As the group continues their journey toward Chungnyeoro, a sub-scenario called Illusory Prison activates, creating a psychic zone designed to drive people insane by triggering their most deep-seated personal traumas. Dokja Kim tells everyone to stand back as the trap takes hold, but his own fourth wall skill grants him complete immunity to the effect. He realizes that even Junghyuk Yu would find this area dangerous, as it is a particularly difficult obstacle for a regressor to face. The constellation's secretive plotter is impressed by Dokja's mental strength and gifts him 100 coin, though another constellation is disappointed that they cannot peek into his personal history. While Hyeonshung Lee relives military memories and Gilyong cries out for his mother, Sangha Yu remains protected by the monk's praying beads Dokja provided. Dokja asks Sangha to cover him while he uses his Dispel Evil skill, which he obtained by destroying the great monk's statue, to dismantle the prison and defeat the specters. Although the scenario is cleared, Huiwan Zheng begins threatening the group as her eyes turn red from the sign of demon slaying, prompting Dokja to knock her out for her own safety. He asks Sangha to look after Huiwan while he collects a specter spirit stone from the remains of the fallen enemy. After the others wake up, Dokja comforts Gilyong because he suspects the young boy had the most traumatic experience while trapped in the prison. Their path is soon blocked by Jae-hee Lee, a high school student and a main character from the original story who is the sole survivor of her school. She expresses disbelief that the group defeated the psychic monsters on their own, as she believed only her master knew the secret to handling them. Her supporting constellation, the god of naval warfare, is identified as an old friend of the bald leader of the peasants' army. Dokja acknowledges that she is a vital character for the naval battles in their future and agrees to let her lead them to the station. This meeting officially marks the completion of the second main scenario. Upon arriving at Chungnyeoro Station during the ongoing third main scenario, the group is immediately struck by the eerie atmosphere and the numerous live Dokkaebi channels broadcasting their expanded scale. Their arrival quickly attracts the attention of a drunk local who harasses the newcomers, specifically targeting the brown-haired woman with an offer for a cheap room while mocking Jae-hee as a little samurai. Jae-hee swiftly draws her sword, threatening the man's life and forcing him to retreat before coldly informing the protagonist that she is done babysitting his group. The protagonist successfully stalls her departure by claiming to be a surviving companion of Junghyuk Yu, a bluff that prompts a skeptical Jae-hee to leave the group under the watch of a young boy while she reports to her master. Playing along with the awestruck boy, the protagonist learns that Junghyuk Yu saved the survivors 3 days prior, though he secretly knows this act of heroism was merely a byproduct of Junghyuk protecting Jae-hee, whose backing constellation is the highly valued god of naval warfare. The boy further explains that the survivors currently rely on Jae-hee to hunt monster meat while trading with the tyrannical landlord coalition for drinking water. The protagonist immediately recognizes this coalition from the original story, knowing their leader is one of the 10 evil, who violently monopolizes safe areas known as green zones, which the locals simply call rooms. Hearing that Junghyuk Yu abandoned the survivors to fend for themselves, the protagonist realizes that this third regression round is already deviating significantly from the original plot. As the group investigates a crowd gathered near the bathrooms, young Gilyong suddenly dashes forward, inadvertently triggering a system alert for trespassing on private property. He is immediately confronted by the imposing Pildu Gong, who ruthlessly activates his level 3 militarized zone stigma. As glowing turrets materialize and aim at the intruders, Pildu Gong demands an exorbitant fine of 500 coins from the child, threatening to initiate fire if his demand is not met. Stepping in to protect the young boy, Dokja quickly instructs his female companion to watch over their unconscious friend. An arrogant henchman approaches them, assuming the Dokja is the boy's guardian, and demands a hefty toll of 500 coins just for setting foot in the area. The Dokja silently notes the absurdity of this highway robbery and reflects on how Junghyuk Yu has allowed these thugs to run rampant. Utilizing his knowledge of the future, He identifies the group as the Landlord Coalition and recognizes their leader as Pildu Gong, a notorious villain destined to become one of the 10 evils. When the young man questions why a public subway station requires an entry fee, the henchman brags that they claimed ownership of the territory over a week ago. Feigning compliance, the Dokja agrees to pay but insists on handing the coins directly to the leader, boldly exposing the henchman as a mere subordinate named Jinchul Kim. He loudly challenges the real Pildu Gong to reveal himself, prompting the true armament lord to emerge and threaten the intruders with instant death if they take another step. Analyzing the newly arrived villain with his unique skills, the young man notes Pildu Gong's incredibly high stats and dangerous defensive abilities. Instead of backing down, he requests permission for his group to stay in the safe area, which Pildu Gong strictly denies unless they pay a daily fee. The Dokja counters by offering valuable intelligence regarding Junghyuk Yu as payment, causing the surrounding thugs to panic. Suspicious of the bold claim, Pildu Gong attempts to extort them further by doubling the entry fee to 1,000 coins. When the young man refuses the outrageous price, the armament lord mercilessly commands his turrets to fire. The explosive blast is barely deflected by the sturdy shield bearer of the group, prompting the Dokja to issue a chilling warning that Pildu Gong will die right where he sits if the fight continues. Before the conflict can escalate further, Junghyuk Yu himself suddenly arrives on the scene. Seizing the opportunity, the Dokja cheerfully greets the intimidating protagonist as if they are old friends, intentionally agitating him while simultaneously triggering an upgrade to his own omniscient skill. Fully aware that powerful celestial beings are watching the broadcast, the young man confidently talks right over Junghyuk, loudly asking him to convince the greedy landlords to let them use the restroom, while Junghyuk's loyal followers angrily urge their master to execute the impudent stranger. In a dimly lit station corridor, Dokja stands behind the imposing Junghyuk Yu, mentally remarking on his supposed luck in having such a companion. Junghyuk turns and acknowledges that Dokja has managed to stay alive. Dokja internally recalls that Junghyuk had never actually accepted him as an ally, having previously pointed his blade at an older, bearded man named Pildu Gong instead. Pildu had allowed them to leave to avoid a bloody confrontation. When Dokja presses Junghyuk about whether he wanted him to die, Junghyuk feigns indifference, though Dokja secretly harbors a strong desire to punch him, holding back only because he suspects Junghyuk's stats are overwhelmingly high. To confirm his suspicions, he activates his character profile skill on Junghyuk. The system attempts to condense the massive amount of data, but Dokja the full version to open, revealing that Junghyuk is a 28-year-old pro gamer currently on his third regression. The profile lists an array of high-level abilities, including close combat and weapons proficiency, alongside incredibly high overall stats, proving that Junghyuk is dangerously powerful. Dokja wonders what kind of dangerous schemes Junghyuk is planning so early in the timeline. Junghyuk then demands to know if he has anything else to say, prompting Dokja to deflect by making a snide remark about Junghyuk's appearance. His fleeting internal thought about killing Junghyuk triggers a warning of disappointment from the constellation prisoner of the golden headband, forcing him to immediately backtrack in his mind. The tension shifts when Junghyuk observes the group using his Eye of the Sage skill and expresses disappointment that a companion named Hyeonshung Lee is so weak, believing Hyeonshung would have been stronger under his own guidance. Dokja struggles to figure out who exactly Junghyuk is glaring at, suspecting it might be the sword-wielding Huiwan Jung, but avoids asking directly to prevent Junghyuk from realizing his thoughts are being read. Realizing Junghyuk is contemplating murder, he quickly distracts him by questioning why he is allowing Pildu Gong to run rampant. He points out that while Junghyuk needs Pildu alive for an upcoming scenario, he does not need Pildu's entire gang, which goes against Junghyuk's usual efficient methods. Using his lie detection skill, Junghyuk haughtily dismisses the concern, stating that he is a busy man and that the plight of the people in Chungnyeoro does not concern him. When Dokja contemplates throwing a punch, Junghyuk unleashes his Tiger God aura, completely intimidating him into backing down. Later, while resting, Dokja notes there is an hour and a half left before the third scenario activates, a survival test that will last exactly 1 week. Inspired by the constellation bald leader of the peasants' army, who demands a revolution, he resolves to thwart Junghyuk's plans. Huiwan Jung soon approaches, teasing him about his visible fear during his confrontation with Junghyuk. He lies to save face, claiming he is more concerned about Pildu Gong's gang, who are currently claiming ownership of public spaces and extorting rent from the other survivors. He explains that they need Pildu's help to clear the scenario, but Huiwan suggests they just defeat the gang by joining forces. She attempts to activate her Time of Judgment skill, but it fails because the absolute good constellations do not view the gang as strictly evil, proving that divine morality does not align with human justice. He then proposes a difficult alternative strategy where they must lure Pildu Gong out of his militarized zone. He explains that Pildu's powerful defensive turrets will be completely useless if he steps outside his designated area of effect. However, this will be challenging because Pildu has heavily barricaded himself inside the largest room in the station with plenty of supplies. With only an hour remaining, he advises that they should focus on finding their own room for now. Right on cue, a floating creature appears above the crowd to cheerfully announce the start of the third day. A system window displays the daunting clear conditions for the green zone scenario, tasking the survivors with occupying a safe zone in the station and surviving the monsters that will emerge every night at midnight for the next 7 days. A cheerful but sinister Dokubi appears to explain the brutal rules, encouraging the survivors to either find or steal a safe zone before midnight, sparking immediate panic and ruthless murders among the desperate crowd. While Sangha is horrified by the violence, Dokja calmly assesses the situation, knowing that green zones vary significantly in capacity and suggesting they split up to find a room large enough for their entire group. He sends the others off in pairs while he searches alone, planning to reconvene if they remain roomless 20 minutes before the deadline. Internally, however, Dokja remembers from his novel that there are absolutely no rooms left in Chungnyeoro, leaving them with a grim dilemma regarding whether they should take innocent lives to survive. As the countdown reaches 30 minutes, Dokja is suddenly interrupted by Bihyang, who complains that he is boring the constellations by staring at a blank screen. This inadvertently reveals to Dokja that the celestial beings cannot see his digital copy of the Apocalypse novel, prompting him to wonder about the true identity of the mysterious author who sent it. His thoughts are derailed by a nearby scream, leading him to the young boy that was assigned to watch them earlier. He was standing in front of a corpse he just killed, and was threatening Dokja not to come close. Dokja told him not to worry. Jaehi came from behind, asking Dokja why he was acting laid back, bragging how no one will dare come near her room, revealing she doesn't want him to die because she admired how he stood up to her master. Dokja revealed how finding a room isn't necessary to survive, prompting the girl to ask if he is as strong as her master. Just then, Junyun appears and advises her to return to her safe zone. He warns Dokja about his own impending death if he chooses to fight the monster, but Dokja shrugs him off. Dokja regroups with his exhausted companions, who are furious about the exorbitant rent being demanded by the landlords upstairs. Dokja then presents his group with two distinct options for survival. The first is a morally corrupt but practically easy path where they simply kill a weak group of 5 to steal their green zone, a brutal reality that young Gilyong bravely volunteers for despite Sangha's protests. However, Huiwan firmly rejects this path, confessing her past kills but declaring her refusal to become a monster, asking instead for the second, more arduous option. Smiling with relief, Dokja assures them he was not testing their morality but needed their absolute, unquestioning obedience for the dangerous second plan. With only 5 minutes left, he explains that the monsters will swarm down from the ground floor, meaning holding their current position is a certain death sentence. As the scenario officially activates and terrifying beasts begin to materialize and roar, Dokja grabs Gilyong and shockingly orders his companions to run directly toward the deadly monster horde.